Hello, welcome to my second tips and techniques presentation. This time I decided to delve into Java and mobile app development for games. Well, some things that I noticed while researching mobile games made main Java was that there were a lot of GameLoft games that were made using Java, and id Software has made Doom and Wolfenstein RPG games in Java also. So Android Studios is a IDE built by Android, which has many tools for to help app development. Also, Android Studios has a built-in app emulator, and I'll be using Android Studios for the demonstration soon. The Android SDK was made as a part of Android Studios but can be used separately. Android SDK contains libraries, tools, and APIs built to help in Android app development. With just focusing on the game framework from the last video, while making a game project in libgdx for mobile, you would need to configure the platform for Android and to provide the directory of the Android SDK. Simple but really important to know, APK files are the file extension format for Android apps. I'll be setting a new project using the platform as desktop and Android. Also, for the Android platform, it requires me to set the directory of the Android SDK. Testing will be done using the desktop application for quicker testing. I'll be using the project from last presentation for Java games as a base to dive into mobile inputs. Within Android Studios, I'll be configuring the desktop application to be able to test within the editor. Awesome, we connected the game from the last video to Android Studios. So first, we are going to create a touch input for the move to player. We need to set up a vector 2 for the touch input to know where on the X and Y axis the screen is touched. We need to set the X and the Y of touch position to the input for getting X and Y for storing the vector. Using unproject, it gets the location that is touched on the display for the viewport. Then we can move using the center the cat sprite using this touch on the screen display, creating a drag and move input. So since I don't believe that drag input seems fair, I'm also leaving an option for another type of input. Let's do tap input by having the X value of the screen. Using the same movement for A that was used for A and D, the same method, we can move the X-axis with the same move variable. We will just have to use the negative and positive move speed to move the player left and right. Awesome. We set up two different touch inputs to move the player cat. We set up tap input this time for both sides of the screen, which seems more fair. There is an issue that I've noticed that the player's movement isn't confined to the screen. Let's work on some collider-based restrictions for the player based on clamping the width of the world and the player's sprite size. I see the issue. I was using the cat's collider instead of the cat's sprite to confine the player to the screen's border. Since we now have full player movement on the screen, so let's make a replayable game loop for this game. Let's make it a endless runner or sort of the dodging genre game. We're going to have to create infinite obstacles to dodge and create a timer to see how long the player can make it. So we are going to need to create an array of these obstacles later on. It will add and delete when we spawn and remove them off screen. Also, we're going to need to set up an collider and create an object and texture to be initialized in the create function. So I will set up this a little bit strangely, but I will creating a loop for each particle spray on screen, creating the in-game logic for movement, collision, and removing them off screen before I set up drawing and spawning for the obstacles. Here is a timer that the obstacles spawn on. Now I need to make and create obstacle function that is called from the spawner. This will handle creating a new sprite object, scaling the size, and spawning the obstacle from the top of the world, from the world boundaries between the x axis of both borders and at the top of the y axis. But it won't be able to be seen yet until this obstacle sprite are added to the draw order. The reason why the obstacles weren't able to spawn was because I accidentally added the obstacle spawner to the for loop, which now it should be able to work after I removed it. Now I need to create a game timer and a font for the in-game time text. For the font, you might need to be careful or mess around with the location and scale the font a little bit to be able to see it better in-game. I added the game timer float in the game logic to add delta time or real time. I also added the game timer to reset 0 when the player collides into the obstacle. When drawing, I create a int variable for that so that it converts the game time from a float to an integer, and having a string that reads for the font, and also a caution x0 and 5 for the top left of the screen was set for my chosen pixel size, but it might not be consistent for your own set pixel size, because it might cause the font to go off screen or set to some position that might not be intended. To create a APK, go to the top left, build and create APK. That will build and generate a file within the project files to be able to use an APK. So while building an APK, there could be a lot of issues that could occur, from like having assets in the wrong folder to compatibility issues to be used. The biggest recommendation is to look up resources that might help you to check with these errors. I also put some resources in the description, but it could also be as simple as missing assets or a small slight error in programming that gives you trouble with building. Also, what I used to test this app was the Android emulator BlueStacks. Here are some pros and cons for Java mobile app development. I tried to keep it less general than the last video. Some pros are backwards compatibility of Java games that can be played on older Android devices. The Java garbage collection scheduler, but can also be seen as helpful, but also as a performance bottleneck. Some cons are that mobile game engines have support for mobile app development and having tools to speed development. Also, recently Godot has called up performance-wise over Java. Mobile game development is more popular for C languages and with Unity and Godot. Also, general cross compatibility issues between platform and different mobile sizes can also be seen as some issues in development for mobile app games. Here are my references, and thank you for watching the video.